Most doctors are brilliant in the room and lost in the moment when it comes to filling the schedule. They were trained to treat patients, never to build a business. So they lean on referrals, hope, and word of mouth, and then they wonder why their growth stalls. Now, my guest today is the rare exception. Dr. Ryan Sultan is a Columbia trained, dual board certified psychiatrist and a serious researcher. He is also one of the most savvy marketing providers I have ever met. He took a clear clinical philosophy and built Integrative Psych into a practice with locations in New York, Miami, and Montana. In this conversation, we get into how he actually did it, the marketing that worked, the money he wasted, how he got out of being the bottleneck, and how he keeps quality steady while managing staff across 3 locations. If you own a practice and you want to grow it without being chained to every appointment, this one's for you. So, hey, Ryan, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. How you doing?
Good. My pleasure.
So, Ryan, you are a client of ours. We're building a website. We're doing a little bit of, paid advertising for you. And we met through some mutual friends over I guess, winter break or around winter when you came out to Utah to ski. And frankly, like I told you before, I actually never really heard about your sort of origin story and how you got into running a practice. So tell me a little bit about your background. Why don't you start with, undergrad, right? And then kind of your progression through academia, and then you deciding to start a multi-location integrative psychiatry practice.
Yeah, for me, I went to liberal arts college, and I'm happy about that. I went to a small liberal arts college. I put a lot of thought into an environment that would be a good learning environment for me. I definitely was on the younger side from a maturity point of view, and a larger university I would have gotten lost in. And so in a liberal arts college, there's a lot of like, how do you think about critical thinking? How do you think about putting together your ideas? And I kind of just fell into being interested in environmental science, which is I always liked animals and like the environment, and I was pretty into that. And I did a lot of work on that. I did research. I used to go out in Connecticut to lakes, and we would do coring in the winter and the summer, and we would go down and think about the lake, you get like the layers going down. So I would core down like hundreds and hundreds of feet. And then I would take these cores and I would sit in a lab sampling them like a robot, putting them in ovens to sort of like burn them down to look at the sort of like the measurement of the different compounds, and then like track that over time, and then look for things that we could send off to get dated. And I actually recreated lake level changes. And I think my most cited paper is a paper I wrote then, which is related to climate change, which is just funny because that's like not what I do anymore.
That's hilarious. Wow.
But so I was very into that. And I thought I wanted to go into environmental science as a career. And I could not swallow what I was going to get paid. Like I just did not know how to make that work. I sort of wandered around, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. My dad's a physician. There's a lot of physicians in my family. My dad's a psychiatrist.
Gotcha.
And growing up, like I'd been in my own treatment. I had an idea about what psychiatry was, and I liked it. And I thought, well, I mean, like that's something that sounds interesting to me. And what I liked about medicine as an opportunity is that it's an endless learning situation.
Right.
And that's very much like my vibe. I'm always like, oh, what new thing can we be doing and learning about? So I ended up in medical school, and I tried to I avoided psychiatry a lot. My dad wanted me to be a surgeon.
Oh, really? Oh, was
They wanted me to be a surgeon.
Was it your dad, or your dad wanted you to be a surgeon, or did you have were you adverse to it because your dad was in psychiatry?
I was actually always into psychiatry. Like I was like, this is so interesting because psychiatry is so fun because it's the most untapped wild west part of medicine. We don't really understand things the way we understand them in the rest of medicine. We understand them more now than we did 20 years ago and way more than we did 50 years ago. But the way psychiatry conceptualizes its conditions is similar to the way the rest of medicine was conceptualizing things almost a century ago. And that's exciting because there's all this gray and there's all this knowledge to put together. There's all this
Yeah.
thinking, right? Like, you think about these different conditions. And one of the things my dad said to me years ago, and it stuck with me, is he said, when you think about a psychiatric condition, like a DSM condition, the DSM is just a starting point for it. There's people that look exactly like what the DSM describes, but then there's all these other people that don't necessarily fit into that. And I really got excited about that. And I got excited about like what's all the things that we know or don't know, and how can we
Yep.
sort of start to follow that. And so I did my residency training in adult psychiatry. I did it in Atlanta at Emory. And I was really lucky because it's the kind of big university that has many different types of training environments, which is what you want
Yeah.
as a doctor. You want like a variety of places
Yeah.
you're going to work with. And I got interested in schizophrenia, and I got interested in like data research. And then I went
Yeah.
on to child psychiatry. I did that here in New York at a combined program with Columbia and Cornell. And then as that was wrapping up, I had options. And the main thing that everyone does would be to go get a job at a hospital system. And I thought that's what I wanted, because the old school version of that is you show up and you're the attending now, and you got these
Uh-huh.
residents and there's all this teaching that goes on. But the reality is that most hospital jobs, and just in general healthcare
Big
jobs,
healthcare, right? Like big
they're awful.
healthcare.
They
Yeah.
become
Yeah.
awful, right? Like
Yeah.
there's such a pressure to be quote unquote efficient,
Yep.
which I feel like is like bullshit. Like they say it's efficiency, but like they sort of, it's like how do we get you to move as quickly as possible,
Yep.
with no sense of like spending time with patients, getting to know them, and
And
you
it's
also
across the
lose.
chain, right? It's like pharmacists, it's NPs, it's, mental health
No. It's just the
professionals, right?
RNs. We all feel this
Everybody,
way. We
right?
all feel
Yeah,
this
yeah,
way.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and if you go on social media, and maybe this is just when I'm getting fed, but as I rejoined Instagram recently, I was shocked by the number of people in the healthcare field that are very frustrated
Yeah.
with their
Yeah, that's right.
positions. So I saw that coming in, and I was
Yeah.
like, and look, I'm grateful that I noticed that earlier, because and I said,
What
I don't
around what
want
year
this
was
kind of job.
this?
This would have
Around what
been
year?
2016.
Okay. Yeah, so over
So
10 years
yeah.
ago. Yeah, sure.
So
Yeah.
and so I had another opportunity, being at a big university with a lot of research. They have options to take jobs that are basically research fellowships that are funded by the government, and they don't
Okay.
pay very well.
Yeah.
But a research fellowship, it's like a PhD or it's a postdoc. Like, it's a choose your own adventure,
Yeah.
and you don't get paid very well, but you can do what you want within reason. And that was very exciting for me. So I spent a lot of time learning about research. How do I write a grant? How do I write a paper? How do you put together scientific concepts? How do you do these data analyses? And I got like 10 times smarter. I mean,
Wow. Okay.
even if I didn't, I remember I used to say, even if I never did anything in research, I was so happy I spent those 3 years doing that, because I came out a much, much better writer, a much clearer thinker, a much better communicator. I was a better clinician. I was a better teacher.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so while doing that, though, I said to myself, I can't afford to live on this like $50,000 a year, like government stipend
In New York
in
City
New
at
York
that,
City.
right?
So
Like
I was like,
Manhattan, right? Yeah.
I got to start seeing patients.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I put up my shingle, so to speak, right? I made a website by myself.
Yep.
It was like ryansultan.com.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And I made a Google business
Mhm.
profile, which at the time was not that popular. And I got lucky, okay? Because, like, businesses are somewhat about luck, right? And at the time, ZocDoc had just started.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah,
it
sure.
was just New York was one of their early places, and at a very affordable price. You could pay a monthly fee, and you
Yep.
showed up on there and you got referrals. And I actually built up more patients than I knew what to do with pretty
Wow.
quickly on that. Yeah.
Just through
Um
and it's obviously there's a lot more people on there
Oh
these
no, no,
days, right? But
ZocDoc today you could not
yeah,
do this with. This
yeah.
is,
That's
10
awesome.
years ago now. I got lucky. No, I mean, just, I
Yeah.
got early on it. Now they
Yep.
do all this stuff where they basically charge you for every referral they send you. And even
Yeah.
if you never talk to the person, you get charged like the $90 or whatever. And
Yeah.
so I don't even know that we accept many from them anymore. But I got lucky, and that actually got us started. And I did that for a while, and I just did kind of my own thing. And I like doing that. But what was hard was that I realized that this didn't feel like a good end game, because the moment
Mm.
I stop seeing patients, I make no money. And if I want to see more patients, at some point you need help. So I
Yep.
just I got like a part-time admin, and that allowed me to sort of speed up a little bit, and they started taking care of some of the billing. And, I tried
So
to
they were doing just
offload.
true admin stuff, billing, and were you taking were you doing insurance at the
Nope, we
time?
weren't accepting
Oh,
insurance.
really?
Nope.
Wow. So you were cash pay from the very beginning, huh?
Yep.
Wow.
Um,
Nice.
and that's something that you really you need to be in both a good market for that, and you need to be
Sure.
special in some way. You need to be able to make sure that you're special in some way. And I got
How were
lucky
you?
coming from. I mean, I
How
came
were
from
you
a
special?
fancy institution
Ah,
that
I see.
really matters a lot to
Yeah.
people. I have like an institutional knowledge where I can think about psychiatry over the course of like 75 years, because my dad has been doing this, and then I had a
Yeah.
psychiatrist for many years that probably trained in like the 50s. So I have like
Yeah.
much more of a sense of that trajectory. And like a number of us, I had a really positive experience as a patient in psychiatry. I have
Mm.
ADHD, and I was like not a good student. Like elementary
Yeah.
school, I was in like all of the remedial. I was in like the math lab, and I was in the lowest reading group. And like, I remember I like took out some book to read in third grade when everyone else was reading, and apparently it was like for like a kindergartner. The teacher was like trying to nicely take that away from me so I didn't
Oh
get made
no.
fun of. Right? Yeah, I know. Like exactly. So
Seems
I
like
didn't
that
have like
stuck with you, Ryan. It seems like that
100%,
moment stuck with you,
100%.
bud.
And
Yeah.
I wasn't treated. I wasn't treated for my
Yeah.
ADHD.
Yeah.
And I made it to medical school not treated for ADHD. And I actually was really struggling the first year of medical school, and
Oh, I
had
see.
to redo something over the summer. And at that point, I started seeing the psychiatrist at the medical school, and
Uh-huh.
she was like, "So let's talk about why you haven't been treated, even though sounds like you had this diagnosis for a long time." And that made a big difference for me, because
Yeah.
it really it made the difference where I felt like I remember saying to her, it was like there's been a radio on my entire life, and someone had turned it off.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that made a really big difference. So I felt I have a lot of passion about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that comes through when I'm working with people, and people respond really well to that.
Um, before I go on to what you're doing now, in those early days, the ZocDoc days, call them, right? Did you specialize in anything like ADHD or executive functioning, or were you just kind of like a general,
Yeah, I definitely
therapist?
was getting a lot of ADHD patients, and this is
Okay.
before everyone was interested in ADHD.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was
I
like
know. Yeah.
actually like an expert on it, and I had written
Yeah.
papers on it and things like that.
Yeah.
And so that made a difference. But I saw a lot of depression, I saw a lot of anxiety,
Yeah.
a lot of bread and butter stuff. But I also
Yeah.
did a really good job on every single patient. I spent a lot of time with them. I was very
Yeah.
attentive. And that, I think, had a nice spread effect. People stayed with me. I have people to this day that
Wow.
are patients from that long ago.
Wow.
And I think when you're starting out, like how do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah.
How do you sound special? How do you make a difference that someone wants to work with you? Especially today, where there's now in like a post-COVID telehealth world.
Yeah. You don't
Uh,
know what the difference between a coach, a therapist
oh, well,
is,
that's a whole other
a
problem, right? Yeah, yeah,
psychiatrist. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like, it's very much the Wild West still in a lot of ways in terms of practitioners and the like how you can get help, right?
And I think the other thing is that I was never a med management guy. Did you get
Right.
meds for me? Yeah, of course you got meds for me. But I I, I
Yeah.
I was proficient in a number of different psychotherapies, and I was able to help people with organizational skills with their ADHD and do motivational
Yep.
interviewing. So a lot of the stuff that falls into the categories of these other domains, as a physician, I had the training to do those things too. And
Yep.
for people that either had out of network reimbursement so that they could get reimbursed for our sessions, or were willing to pay, they were much happier having me doing that with them than they
Yeah.
were trying to split it up between a whole bunch of different people.
Yeah, yeah. Again, just still staying on the ZocDoc days, one thing that I always talk about with different practices is, and they always ask me, like, is your marketing going to work here? Right. And I always say, I'm not sure. I don't know what and usually it's because I don't know what the competition in your market is like. Right. I think a lot of people fail to realize that how many providers, clinicians are in that particular market has a lot to do with whether or not they're able to be successful in launching a practice. And even more so these days. Now, when you first started, Sultan.com, whatever, in New York, New York is an animal of a market in so many ways, right? Do you really think that in those early days, like being able to talk about why you're special, kind of niche down or show the 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 academic background, the fact that you had so much like different types of psychotherapy training, do you think that differentiated you in the early days, and then you got more referrals that kind of came in,
Well,
and that's sort of where the
the other thing
floodgates
that I did is
opened?
whenever you called
Mm.
and you requested an appointment, I called you back. And I
Yep.
usually called you back within 30 minutes, if not
Yep.
the same day.
Yep. Yep.
And I sat on the phone, and I'm not charging for this, right? Like I sat on the phone for, I mean, I'd say it would be 20 minutes, but it would almost always be 45 minutes, like
Yeah.
listening, understanding the person, trying to give them a little bit of some nuggets of what it might be like to work with me.
Yep.
Because it's a, I don't know, it's like a value proposition. I don't know if that's the right use of the
That's right.
terminology.
It's a pitch.
You can do that passively online, but a personal conversation is so meaningful, and that's actually a lot harder to do today. I've noticed that we have a lot more trouble getting people on the phone that are new inquiries to have a conversation with them, which we still do, but it's harder to
Yeah.
get people on the phone than it seems like it used to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
But that made a big difference because if you got on the phone with me, like if you didn't make an appointment, you were annoyed you couldn't make an appointment because it was
Yeah.
some reason that it was just financially impossible for you or something like that would be the most
Right.
likely explanation. Or in some cases, it was they had something very specific going on where I was like, look, I know you like me, but like you really need someone that knows even more about this than I do. And there are people that know a lot more about this than I do. Like for instance, like eating disorders,
Right.
in particular.
Yep.
And I think that made the biggest difference. I think that made the biggest difference for me. Because
Cool.
I almost everyone wanted to end up having an appointment.
No, I mean, that's so let's fast forward to let's say the genesis of integrative psych, right? The multi-location practice you run today. You mentioned that, it's harder to get people on the phone. Um, Tell me about integrative psych. What was the idea behind it, and sort of graduating, if you would, from sort of being your own personal brand into actually building a brand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think for building a brand, what was really important for me was that, like, I don't know anything about marketing or branding, and particularly like when I started, I knew negative amounts. So
Yep.
I just kept thinking, like, what do I know? And this is kind of a translation of my research mind. What do
Yeah.
I know about the field that will matter to everyone else, to the patients, that
Yep.
that if they understood that would be helpful for them? And one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that really struck me in my training was that, and we still have this problem in mental health, is that there's like dozens of ways to evaluate a mental health condition and to think about it, and there's dozens
Mm,
of ways to treat that condition. And
right.
people have different views on what they should do, and it's very ideological around that. I'm talking about like, I'm not, the simplest explanation is psychotherapy versus meds, but even that within the field,
Yeah.
it splits up even more than that, right? Like what type of psychotherapy, what kind of modality of that. And
Yep.
and what I found over and over and over again is that the most effective way to help people, and this is supported by every time we do a study, is you got to start stacking treatments with people. Helping people with a psychiatric condition is hard. None of our treatments really knock it out of the park
There's no
alone.
silver bullet for it,
No,
right?
no,
Yeah,
there's just
yeah,
not, right? Like,
yeah.
this is not like you have a pneumonia that's,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just
by
you're on antibiotics and you're out of
bacterial and
here,
you
right?
like,
Yeah.
that doesn't exist. In fact, most of medicine is not like that, right? Most of medicine is chronic conditions that need to be managed.
Yep.
That's really what the vast majority of what modern medicine is today. And so I really was like, how do I think about what? And I went through multiple names actually, and I
Mhm.
ultimately stumbled upon the word integrative because it means putting together disparate things, separate things,
Yep.
and putting them together. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to take the the cognitive behavioral therapists and the psychodynamic therapists that each think the other one are wasting each other's time and be like, no, they're both valuable in
They
different
should be
types of
integrated.
ways.
Yeah.
Then you've got the medication people that, are poo-pooing the psychoanalytic people and all the therapy people. No, 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 no. When you combine the medication and the right psychotherapy, you see more effect for people. And so I really wanted to promote that as an idea. And I said, well, that's the
Yeah.
core of what I want our practice to be. I want that to be how we think about it. And also, I also want us to think about non-Western based treatments that are often
Right.
that are often dismissed. And are they as effective? Probably not most of the time, but are they still effective? Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
There's a study that comes out that if you meditate every day for 45 minutes, you get the same effect on anxiety as you would from a mid-level dose of an SSRI.
Wow. Hmm.
Now, 45 minutes is a lot of
That's a
meditation.
lot. Yeah, yeah, no,
That's a
I
big
can't sit.
commitment. That's a big commitment, but it shows that there's something there, right?
Yeah.
There's a real signal that there's something there.
Yeah. Um, I guess the other question about sort of the genesis of integrative psych, what made you decide to, and you're already kind of an entrepreneur, right? You're running your own individual practice. Um, like and you kind of maybe already knew about some of the challenges that come along with being an entrepreneur, right? And
So
there's
many challenges.
there's the taking care of your patient side of the business, and then there's the business, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I guess, like, what made you decide to kinda take the plunge and hire other clinicians, right? And to make the business part even more complicated, right? By moving out of just being like a single person practice.
I think there's three things. So I'll start with the most selfish one. The most
Yeah.
selfish one was I can't do this. I can't spend the rest of my life just seeing patients on my own.
Yep.
And my academic job is never going to pay particularly well because
Okay.
it's too much on me. It's too
Yeah.
much on me. And if I don't see patients and I take time off, I just don't get paid. That instability made me
Yep.
anxious. So I said, I need another solution, right? And I'm thinking about like what my I don't know, like my grandmother would say, which is like, you need to figure out how to make money in your sleep. That's what my depression
Yeah.
era grandmother. So I haven't figured out how to make money in my sleep, but I have figured out that scaling a business with other clinicians that I do make a much smaller amount of money, but I do make something, right? So I think that's the first and
Yeah.
the most selfish part associated with that. I
And I
think
wouldn't
this
even call that selfish. I think it's practical, and I think a lot of,
as
like,
a
people
doctor, if you talk about liking making money,
I
you are a selfish, evil person. Welcome to my
well,
field. You're not
and
allowed to. You're not allowed to like making money.
it's so funny you say that because, all every healthcare practice that I work with, or then I would just call them selfish then. Because they're like, I'm tired of like putting in these 80 hours a week and
Yeah.
getting, kibbles for it, and but no, I think sometimes we forget that healthcare professionals like are real people too. Right?
No,
And
and
that
it was a
you
lot
guys
of
abide by an oath, I get it, right? But I mean, there's the practical part of living life and enjoying life as well that we all want to be compensated for in that
yeah,
sense.
and
And
especially
yeah,
for us because there's this huge. It's the sacrifice that you make in your time during a critical period in your life
yeah,
where, and I'm stealing this from social media. Don't let anyone ever tell you not to go to medical school. Those 4 years that you spend in medical school will be the best 7 years of your life at the end of 9 or something like that,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
No
yeah,
one tells
yeah.
you, it just keeps going.
With the $500,000 X amount of dollars in
And you
debt and
gotta
all that
like
kind of
it, man. You
stuff,
gotta
right?
like it.
Yeah,
If you don't
it's
like
true.
it, it's you gotta like the
Yeah,
journey. You gotta like the
yeah,
journey. So
yeah,
number one was I'd like to figure out how to make money that doesn't depend on me seeing patients all the time.
yeah.
Number two was we had more patients than I could see. So like
Okay.
there was
Okay.
just like extra patients. Like what are we going to do with this?
That's always a good reason to grow, you know?
Yeah. And I'll tell you what number 3 is. Because we had like a small version of it during the pandemic. I got so mad when all of these low quality telehealth practices started appearing.
Yeah.
And like I would go and I'd log in and I would try to be a patient with them, or I would sign up with them as a clinician. I'm like, this is garbage, like what they're doing. Like the quality of what they're providing people is to me like embarrassing. Like
You
you're
talking about
basically
the patient experience or just like
the patient
the
experience. The patient
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
to me, like let's go back to psychiatry and like this idea that it's actually very complicated. You know, you can make psychiatry really stupid. You can make it stupid because you know what you do? You take the DSM criteria, which by the way are not a checklist and are never supposed to be a checklist, but you just hand them to a patient and you ask them yes or no. Okay. And then you just do whatever that happens. And if they say yes to enough things, then they meet the criteria and you spend 3 minutes with them and you write a medication and you send them off. And I was horrified by that.
Yeah.
I was horrified by that at a societal level. I was horrified by that as someone who cares about his field.
Craft,
And I got
yeah.
angry. I got so
Yeah.
angry, and I was like, I want to destroy them. I want to destroy them. I was like, I'm gonna try to build my own thing.
Yep.
And, you know, that's proven to be harder than one imagines, especially when you don't have like venture capital money or PE money or like health insurance companies paying you like or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's really what motivated me. And I think that actually has kept me motivated is
Yeah.
that there is a sense of a mission that I care about. I want to sleep at night, right? Like I want to feel like the treatment that I am promoting and helping people get is something that I feel like we're doing good work for people.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I still feel that way to this day.
So there's two really unique things and about you when I met you. One is about marketing and the second is about technology. And I want to double click on the marketing thing first. And, for all the people who are listening out there or watching the clips out there, when I met Ryan, we were like in a Airbnb somewhere in Utah, and we were nerding out a little bit about Google business profiles of all things. I
Search
never
engine
talked to
optimization.
anybody. Yeah, yeah. We were. I never talked to anybody about these things as excited as Ryan was, right? And he started throwing out all these like technical SEO terms, and I'm like, dude, aren't you like a doctor? You're like the most knowledgeable doctor about SEO I've ever met, you know? And so Ryan started actually just he showed me his website. I was like, "Holy crap! There's a lot of blog content on here. Like, did you write all of this?" And he was like, "Yep, I wrote all of it." And then on top of that, he was like, "Here's all the keyword. I did all the keyword research. I got all the backlinks. Look at the page structure of the site." And so Ryan was actually not only just creating content, which I feel like 90% of practices do not do or don't understand, but not only that, but he was actually like pretty elbows deep into it when it came to the technical part of the SEO as well. So I'm curious, Ryan, like I would say 1 in 10, practice owners that I meet have that sort of knowledge that you do when I met you when it came to marketing. Why did you decide to just go so deep into marketing, almost apply like your research background to learning SEO and learning digital marketing? I'm so curious about that. And I hope for the people who are listening out there, like if you have a genuine curiosity about wanting to grow your business, you should probably have a genuine curiosity about marketing. So, Ryan, tell me a little bit about, sort of how you got into it, why you dove in so deep and why you decided to get so hands on with it.
It's sort of in response to that third thing where I said, there are all these like online telehealth systems, and
Yeah.
I looked at how they were probably getting patients, and I
Mm.
realized that they had marketing budgets with so many zeros,
Mm.
and we don't have that kind of money. And
Yeah.
I would sit around, I'd think to myself, you got to be creative. We have to do something different. We have to do something interesting. What do I have to leverage? And I thought to myself, well, I'm like a nerdy, fancy Ivy League doctor. So like, let's go out there and hey, I still do this. I'm like, you just got to stand under lampposts wearing outfits that you didn't think you were going to wear until someone picks you up. And I would answer all kinds of questions with reporters over and over and over
So
again,
smart.
and
Yep.
and sometimes getting backlinks and sometimes not getting backlinks.
Yep.
And I think
But
that
you
made a
understood the importance of a backlink, though, right?
yeah.
Especially, you know,
Thank you, Reddit.
yeah. I mean, so but you read on Reddit about
Yeah,
backlinks,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I went
You
real
got
deep.
down
I went
that
real
deep.
deep into that.
Yeah.
I
Was it
still do.
interesting to you? Was it
Yeah,
interesting to you, or is it
yeah,
just
'cause it was
boring?
new
Because if it was boring and
information.
yeah, yeah,
It was new information.
yeah,
It was very tedious, and
yes,
it was hard to keep steam on it. But that was one of the things that really occurred to me that I do. And I knew, but I knew that if we were going to go anywhere, we were never going to get anywhere just by throwing money at advertising, like
yeah,
directly at, because we just didn't
that's
have the
right.
money to compete. We just didn't have that,
Yeah,
right? So I had to come up with other ways to do that. So content, videos. I try to think, if I'm looking for a doctor, what do I want? What makes a difference for me? So we
right.
spent a lot of time with pictures, and I would coach the clinicians on how to talk about themselves on a video so that people feel like they get to know them.
Yep,
And we put a lot of time also in that once the patient reaches out, how do we sort of move them along our journey in a way that they feel comfortable, and that
yep.
they're feeling like they're getting value from step by step.
Yeah, and I think that one really important thing to point out in what you just said is you're trying to understand what the patient is looking for. How's, they may not be searching, some of them might be searching CBT or, you know what I mean? Like, but most of them are going to, like, they're going to engage with you on a common word, right? That may not be as clinical or academic, right? And so I think a lot of the blog content stuff that you were writing was very relatable stuff, right? To the common person, right? And I think that's what was able to really get you a lot of that initial kind of website traction, up front. Um, Besides the SEO, what were some other things that you did in the early days that kind of really helped you with your marketing?
We have local connections, and there are
Uh-huh.
listservs that I got on. You can't go wrong with like old school kind of stuff. Like, people
Yep.
still would love to go see the doctor that someone said they had a good
Yep.
experience with. I mean, that
Yep.
that's
That's why we
always
have
going to
Google
be
reviews.
that's
Yeah,
always
that's why
going to
we have Google
but it's going to
reviews.
beat Google. That beats a Google
Yeah.
review.
Sure. Fair enough.
It's real. We spent a lot of time trying to get Google reviews. That's been very hard. That's a very hard thing to do in healthcare,
It is.
especially in psychiatry. People
Right.
are definitely like mixed feeling uncomfortable about that.
They are
Um,
anonymizing. I don't think they fully rolled it out yet, but they are going to allow anonymous reviews. I think they're allowing this now because they're a little bit better at catching like fake reviewers and spam reviewers. And so, actually, the main driver, as I read, for why they wanted to allow anonymous reviews was mainly for healthcare, so that people could feel comfortable leaving like a positive or a negative review for that matter, by being anonymous. So that hopefully will change, but there's probably some problems that come with that too. So
Staying connected to other clinicians in the community. So if someone comes to me and they have a
yep,
therapist, like making a point of talking to them. If they're
yeah,
at a specific school, making a point of going back and talking. It's because people still want relationships. They want to
yeah,
know that they're connected with someone, and this isn't just occurring in isolation.
yeah.
And I think that there's a synergistic effect the more and more you sort of do these things.
Yeah, I obviously, like, a lot of practices come to me for digital marketing, but sometimes a practice comes to me and I'm like, "You know what? You're not ready for digital marketing. Like, nobody in your community knows who you are. Like, you should be networking and partnering first with people as you get off the ground, because if you just try to, like, some of them are like, "Oh, I just opened my practice, let's launch some ads." I'm like, "That's the worst thing you could do right now." First of all, you have no reviews, so yeah, there's going to be a bunch of people who see your ads. They click through to a no review practice, they're not going to do anything with you. You know what I mean? So work on getting those initial patients first and getting your reviews before you even touch digital marketing, because sometimes it's some people are just a little bit too early for it, right? um
But it's, I wonder about what the next phase of this is,
yeah,
because
yeah.
with AI search,
Yep.
it used to be that, okay, so like your physical space was the first place that we had. Then now it was
Yep.
your statement on the internet. And there's a number of places you could manage and control that. You have your own website, your backlink to other pages. Maybe you're on
Yep.
Doximity, whatever it is. But now we get a you know we get a good number of people that are coming that like Claude or like
Yep.
ChatGPT recommended us.
Yeah.
Um,
So in this world of AI search, especially for healthcare, and I think Ryan, you're the fact that you've published so much um, content out there, not just on your blog, but the academic stuff that you've done as well, right? And the citations that you've gotten there. What AI is able to do now is before, like just compared to where AI is now, the way Google, the old Google kind of search engine worked is pretty dumb because it could only look for keywords and sort of associate keywords, and backlinks would be a sign of authority. But now what happens is when you search with AI, first of all, it has all the context on you already, right? It knows that you might have 2 kids, you might be married or not married, it knows what kind of job you have. And then as you're looking for help for mental health or any kind of condition, right? It knows that context. And now not only does the AI able to crawl your website and search it like Google used to do, but now it can take that information and corroborate that information in other places around the internet, right? And if it can corroborate that with something that Ryan posted from Columbia or published from Columbia, right? If he got a grant for this project and then, he published that, and then that all leads back to the Integrative Psych website, there it is for sure going to surface that, that request. And so I think what you've done, Ryan, is actually you've inadvertently kind of laid the foundation to give yourself a leg up with AI search because you've created a graph for your practice that is not just on your website, but it's on your Google business profile. It's on all the different papers that you've published, right? And one thing that we will do after we help you launch your site, one big thing is there's this thing called same as schema. And what same as schema is basically a way, some code that goes on your website that can connect your website to that paper you published at Columbia, to your LinkedIn profile, to your social media profile. So when
make
the
it easy
AI
for the AI to make those
Exactly.
connections.
When
Yeah,
it
make it
lands
easy.
right there, it's like, oh, wow, this guy actually did this. This guy did this. Okay, I can verify all this now. Now I feel more comfortable recommending this, to the user who's engaging in search. So yeah, I think it's gotten more difficult, right, to be able to get found, and you got to do a little bit more now to be able to get found in those searches. So
But I actually think doctors need to figure this out. I think we
yeah,
need to figure this out fast. I feel very strongly that if physicians want to continue to have any level of autonomy or any level of influence over the field, that you need to start to figure this out like now,
yep.
because it's if you it, we're not at the point where it's too late, but we're like moving along where it gets harder to get connected to these types of things. It's certainly harder than it is now than it was 10 years ago.
So like kind of like you were talking about, like when you were getting the practice started, you didn't have the venture capital, private equity backing, like all that stuff. And obviously there's the Better Helps, there's all these, they're trying to do this AI thing right now. But the thing is, like, almost everybody's equal in some sense, right? Like, not everyone's been able to build that graph. And so there is kind of this arbitrage opportunity that I see right now in kind of like the early days of SEO, right? You could throw a website up there and you would get found like pretty quickly and, with decent volume. And I feel like we're still in those kind of early days where if you are laying the foundation, you're building a good website, you're publishing content on your website, you're publishing content outside of your website, whether it's on your LinkedIn or Substack or whatever you're doing, right? Like that's a great way to get started, right? And what I do want to touch on technology, Ryan, because I think that's a really that's something that you've like over-indexed on when you were talking to me about your practice. I mean, over-indexed in a good way, right? Um, and so, you've built this system, Therasas, right? You've built the Sigmund method, right? And some tools to kind of go along with the Sigmund method. Tell me a little bit about your interest in technology and enabling you as kind of a technology-enabled, integrative psychiatry practice.
Yeah.
Why is that important to you? Why are you passionate about that?
I mean, so before environmental science, I wanted to be like a computer nerd, right? And
Yeah.
like I was like building my own computer in like high school, like a tower and like soldering or
Yep.
whatever. And, I sort of didn't go down that route. I didn't become a programmer. But then when I was in med school, we were still writing notes by paper. And we were
Hmm.
just starting, and this is like 2007 to
Yeah.
2011.
Yep.
And everyone else we're still using fax machines in in medicine. And I had a beeper. Okay, so medicine is very behind when it comes to any integration of technology for a variety of reasons. And I was so excited when we were going to convert to technology. I was like, this is going to be amazing. This is going to be
Yeah.
like a word processor from like a typewriter. This is going to be like spreadsheets, whatever. And I was disappointed because the systems are sort of awful and they've been kind of terrible because they're predominantly billing systems. So when I had, and I would try to make changes in my own institution before I had my own practice, and it's too hard to do that. But I said, oh, my own practice, like, how am I gonna? I'm gonna do that, like, because I
Yeah.
knew that you could systematize all of these things. I knew that you could connect and track. Okay, well, what web page did that person land on? So what were they looking for that they ended up like with me,
Yep.
and use that information to make different decisions and also use it to improve treatment, right? So like we're talking about how fast it is and how we all have this pressure to spend very little time with patients and there's all this documentation to do. One of the things that we spent a lot of time on is an initial assessment tool
Yep.
that everyone gets that is really your like it's sort of your summer reading assignment, okay? And I tell patients like, look, you don't have to do this, I guess, but it's to your benefit, right? Because what
Yeah.
what it's designed to do is ask you questions to get you thinking about things in your mind, organize that information, ask you follow-up questions, and then we have a nice report that then gets produced for the clinician and for the patient. And now the clinician, when they sit down to meet with you, you're able to go a lot further and a lot deeper and use a lot more of your time in that session
Yeah.
productively that would have previously been spent on this other stuff. So, how do you make the most out of that 30 minutes, that 60 or 90 minutes that you have with someone? So I put a lot of effort into that and on the back end of that as well. How do we follow up with people? How do we know that people are doing well? And and I wanted to and to me, I think technology should feel seamless, right? It should not feel like
Yep.
a chore. And a lot of technology feels like a chore, particularly in healthcare. So I really
Especially in healthcare.
yeah,
Yes.
I want it to not feel like a chore. It should
Yeah.
it should feel like magic because what do I want to
Right.
do? I want to sit down in a room with you and talk and help
Right.
you think through things and understand stuff and give you recommendation and answer your questions. I don't want to be like typing into something and looking this thing up and checking these boxes and filling out
Yeah.
11 different forms. And so one of my longer term goals outside of the practice integrative psych has been how do we develop systems that just
Hmm.
make it so easy to like be a doctor, to be like a nurse, easy in the way that like the way all of us want to be a doctor and a nurse, the fantasy that we all have about being a doctor and nurse, not the one that is like chained
Charting.
to a computer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Charting. Oof.
So what are you building that's solving this for the you're opening up a new office in New York. There's gonna be more rooms in there. You've got a location in Miami, you've got one in Montana. So like, you've obviously got grand plans here. Like what is it? What is the system that you're building? Is it helping do you feel like it's helping your clinicians? Is it helping you operate your practice? Like, what do you feel like are the benefits of the system you're building now?
One of the things that's so amazing about those large language models is it's suddenly the thing holding you back in designing something is no longer your technical abilities.
Yep.
It's your
That's
it's
right.
your planning and your ideas,
That's right.
right? Okay,
That's
because
right.
like you if you give it the right instructions.
Yep. It'll come out better than you imagine sometimes.
And so, I, again, getting on my soapbox. So two things I find frustrating, all the like venture capital funded, like low quality telehealth systems that are practices that you can go to. And some of them, and in their defense, they've gotten better. The really bad ones have been shut down, I think, by the DEA and things like that.
Yeah,
But
sure.
the the other thing is the technology that you use. And I think a
Yep.
lot of the technology companies for documenting, for patient work, analysis, chart, AI scribe stuff.
Yep.
They feel very slick to me in like a
Hmm.
I don't trust them way, because what
Hmm.
do they once AI scribe, which has become very popular in medicine and doctors love
Yep.
it, what do they want that information for? They want that
Yeah.
information to make us all disappear. That's the value of this. And so I was like, I don't feel comfortable with these companies. I
Yep.
really did not. So I was like, look, I have the technical knowledges. I run a mental health informatics lab. I do all kinds of data analysis. So, we had a point where I didn't have enough funding for my research assistants through the university. Thank you, NIH, and recent problems that have occurred. But I was like, well, what do we want to work on? And I just started
Yeah.
building systems. So what do the systems do? We do that initial analysis of the patient that's helpful for them. And then once it's there, the clinician pops into the room, we turn on an AI scribe, and your data is treated the same way as it would your 1950s doctor. It is staying on our filing cabinet servers. We are
Yep.
100% in control of that. We are not sending it off to God knows where on the internet. So that privacy, I think, has been really important. The clinicians love it because the thing writes the note for them. The next thing that we've now had it start doing is it will create a action list for the clinicians, and then they can click on those
Mm.
things and it will populate with the prescription that they need and save them times on that. It'll populate with the
Yep.
letter that they need to
These are those
for,
like 5-minute savers that happen 8 times
yeah,
a
yeah.
day potentially, right? That add up to an hour a day, 5 hours a week, 20 hours, 20
And
hours a
why would you
month,
not
right?
want an agent to do that? Why would you not want an agent that's what they're so
Right.
capable of doing that at this point. And then the other thing that we've been doing, which is based on some technology that I developed with a buddy of mine for a grant, is how do we actually get the system to be able to be like a auxiliary brain for
Yep.
the doctors and the nurses. So right now, most of these scribes, all they do is they listen to you, and then they just create a transcript and they try to make a note out of it. It doesn't know anything about the patient at all
Yeah.
or the clinician. Now we're able to use these sort of nodes where you connect different knowledge-based concepts. And so that the system, our Sigmund system that you mentioned, is able to understand, okay, Ryan sat down and he came for a visit, and I know he talked about the fact that, he feels like he's always late to things and, he needs to work on his routine. But I also know that he has a history of ADHD, and I also know that he's on this medication. And I know Andrew, who's this doctor, really his style is to do cognitive behavioral work around organizational skills for CBT. It knows a lot of that information. It collates that, and
That's
it can
context
help
on it.
us.
Yeah.
Right, it's a context. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It has a much wider context, and it allows it to be much, 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 much more helpful. And my goal is first, and foremost, is to eliminate my concerns of us ever doing something or not doing something that is like clearly the right medical decision. But the real goal is now, like, how do we update it so that each of us are like superstars? How are we actually like another order of magnitude better when we have this thing that's really, really, really smart, that's
Yeah.
able to, with someone who has the knowledge to understand it and interact with it, how can they come up with better ideas? How can we look up, okay, well, what's this prescribing? How do I do this? What's it, factual information that is too difficult to find because it's stuck in some journal article that you have to go through 3 different logins through Google Scholar to find it. Well,
Yep.
why is an agent not doing that? Because
Yep.
it can do that research 10 times faster than anyone else is going to be able to
That's
do that, right?
exactly what AI should be doing right now. It should be supporting the
We call it scut work
clinician
in medicine. Scut work.
scut work. Yeah,
That's
it's
what we,
on our end, it's like for SEO, it's like pulling keyword data, going through the now it's like why? Like you just connect your Claude into Uber Suggest or SEM Rush or whatever. It pulls everything
Uber
for
suggests. I don't
that
even
would
know what that one is.
it's a if you're using SEM Rush, it's probably better. But it's like that's the work that you don't want to be paying an analyst to do. You want the analyst to be like going through the ideas that it comes up with and be like, you know what, that's applicable to my my client. That's applicable to my patient. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I think the way you're thinking about that is to enable the clinician to, and again, it goes back to your whole thing where you didn't want healthcare to be so impersonal, right? And like efficiency driven, right? Here you're being efficient so that you can spend more time with the patient, not less time with the patient, basically, right? And I feel like if you take that mentality towards technology, and because I think a lot of practices obviously are not as technical as you or have the foresight and the skills that you do to be able to say, hey, I got to build this thing to know what you want to build. But I think the reality of it is that, again, if you start with the patient in mind and build around the patient and the patient experience, and that also is the clinician experience as well, right? If you make your practice very easy to work with and you enable them, you're going to get really good clinicians to come work for you, right?
And that's something I figured out a while ago was that we actually have two different customers. And
Yeah,
our clinical
that's right.
staff is one of them, and obviously the patients are
Yeah,
one of them. And there's many places. They're able to move around. The clinicians can move around and do different things and work in different places. Why do they want to come and work here? And one of the things I want it to be is I want them to feel like the technology that we have is so lovely and makes their
yeah,
life so easy, and they feel so good about the work that they're able to do that there's no reason for them to go anywhere else.
yeah. So Ryan, I just wanted to, we're just coming up on our time now, but I wanted to wrap with this question for maybe a new practice owner, right? It might be some, let's imagine yourself back in 2016, right? And, let's say they're a single practice. They've got their own patients right now or thinking about expanding. If you could go back and give yourself advice on what the first step to take would be in maybe stepping out, opening an office and hiring other clinicians, what kind of advice would you give yourself or any other person that's maybe thinking about growing their practice or scaling it from just themselves into a brand?
I'll tell you what I wish I had done or
Yeah.
found, which was like a direct partner. I think that
Mm.
it's really, really hard
Like a
to
business
do.
partner or
Yeah,
a
or
okay.
I'm not even being specific. Like whether it's another doctor, whether it's
Oh, okay.
someone who's a bit like any of that, because one of the beauties of humans is that one human plus another human is not two. There's a
Yeah.
synergy that gets created there, and I think that if you have that opportunity and building that with someone else, I think that you're able to do a lot more and do a lot more faster.
I think that's I think that's a that is actually great advice. And sometimes I think a lot of us who decide to start anything, we tend to index towards being go-getters, type A personalities, like get it all done by ourselves.
And still do
Um,
that. You need two
yeah,
people doing that now.
but yeah, I think having a partner, and frankly, even with my experience, not every healthcare entrepreneur is like Ryan, where it seems like you have a little bit of a business sense and a marketing sense. I've definitely met practice owners who have zero business sense and zero, but they hey, they still take the plunge and they want to try it. If you know that that's maybe a weakness of yours, it might be worth it to maybe consider having a partner to start with, right before you take the plunge.
And I think there's a curiosity for me that helped
Yes,
me around.
you're a tinkerer, right?
Yeah, I'm a tinkerer. Like, for better, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse.
Yeah, I'm the same.
But, uh,
Why did I decide to do this myself and not pay someone to do it?
uh, um, I was interviewing at a job for like Anthropic maybe like a year ago, and
Oh, really?
should I do this
Interesting.
instead?
Yeah, I know. Well,
Let
so
somebody
so
else.
how do you feel about it now after seeing what they're doing?
I mean, yes and no, right? I think I know
Yeah.
myself, and I know that in a structured corporate environment, there's a good chance I would not do well because
Yeah, I think I would have pretty, bad performance reviews and
yeah, I would probably I would not want to do things that I think are stupid.
Yeah, me too.
And there's a lot of stupid things that you have to do. And I don't know whether
Ryan
they'll.
is not a team player.
I'm not
But
a player. No, no.
that's
Um,
why you're your own boss, right? You know yourself, you're self-aware, right? And we all have to go down the path we go down. And I think those are tests along the way, right? To see if you're committed to what you're doing and what you're trying to
and
grow,
look, it
right?
feels
So,
cool, right? I mean, like
yeah.
I, I I feel like compared to my peers, and I'm talking like
Mm.
other physicians, the toolbox that I have
Yep.
is so much more vast, and I
Yeah.
forget that sometimes. Like I forget that sometimes is that I have
Totally.
such a wider, more vast toolbox, and in a world that feels like there's a lot changing really fast,
Yep.
I use that to remind myself that's a way that I actually build security for myself.
Yeah. I think that's right. I subscribe to that 100%. And on that really powerful thought and idea, well, thank you, Ryan. Like, this has been a really great interview, and I got to learn a little bit more about you and all the legwork that you put in. And we've had our conversations about obviously the challenges to growing a practice, and not just marketing, but all the other things that come along with it. But I feel like having healthcare entrepreneurs like yourself out there in the world who actually do care about the patient, do care about the clinician as well, right? Because a well-equipped clinician and enabled clinician can do great for a patient. It's heartening to see that it's not just the VC PE backed turn and burn sort of model, and that you are trying to achieve some scale with quality of service still. And it sounds like you're using technology to enable that. So that's awesome, Ryan. Thanks so much, for sharing your story. And if you want to check out Ryan, you can check out integrative-psych.org. I'll leave links to all the social media profiles and some of the content that Ryan has published out there. But again, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. And ryansultan.com is still up with all kinds of nerdy information about my work if you're curious.
I love that. Yeah, we'll make sure that those links get into the description. Awesome, Ryan. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.